Welcome to the Choose to Be podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining our conversation today. We are talking about hypervigilance or policing. We didn't realize we talked about this before, but I don't think we have an actual podcast episode titled this and really dedicated to this terminology, to this concept, to this behavior that shows up a lot. And so we're going to dive into that today. Alana is in the process of writing a blog post around this. So we'll put the link to that in the show notes as well so that you can get even more information around it and have something more in your face to further explore this concept and get curious about how you might be showing up in this way. And I think that today, Alana, I'd love to give even tangible examples because I think often too, women don't, and I'm going to generalize here, but women, betrayed partners, don't recognize that they're showing up in a policing hypervigilant way, can come across as I'm just doing my due diligence or I'm trying to help, but it's really not helping.
I Yeah, sometimes it's really obvious that we are doing something and we go, "Oh, yeah, like, I know this is extreme." And other times, it's become such a way of safety seeking and safety creating,
Yeah.
we hold on to it long term. And I want to first say that it is a normal response and common to betrayal. And there is a season and a period of doing it that almost all partners go through. So I don't want to pathologize this and say something's wrong with you or you're broken. If you're recognizing you're doing it and you're in a place right now where you need it, I don't want to shame you for where you're at. And we'll go over long term what some of the effects can be on you and why it can be problematic long term. We'll go into that. I just want to say if you're in this place of extreme safety seeking through policing, through hypervigilance, it is a really normal response to trauma and to betrayal.
Absolutely. And honestly, just even like how I'm identifying with that and acknowledging, accepting that part of my journey, my story is that when you do have a partner who's hiding so much information and your body knows something is being hidden, or you're like, no, something isn't right. And telling me he's okay, but I don't feel like he's okay. Again, I think that there's a time and a space that's necessary to get some of those puzzle pieces where you're like, no, something doesn't feel right. So it can serve a purpose, I guess is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not sustainable for your own holistic healing.
Okay. I'm going to read a definition and bear with me because I'm going to read it.
Beautiful.
But hypervigilance after betrayal refers to a state of heightened alertness and sensitivity to potential threats or signs of harm, specifically in the context of experiencing betrayal. It is a response to the emotional trauma and loss of trust that comes from being betrayed by somebody who is expected to be loyal and trustworthy. It's a common response to betrayal following a disclosure. And after you've had this betrayal, if you don't know yet if you're safe, it makes perfect sense in this heightened state of alertness, especially if either you have warning signs or you knew that something happened, that your brain would be in this constant state of, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And where you can't get in their head and know exactly what is happening, it makes perfect sense why you would be looking in the world for tangible proof that something is or isn't happening, looking for tangibles that you can hold on to try to make sense and have clarity of your situation. And of course, you want that.
Okay. This is just what came to my mind, Alana, and tell me if this is like way off or what. But I'm thinking, as you said, that the difference between a hypervigilant behavior pre full disclosure versus a hypervigilant behavior, policing behavior post full disclosure.
Hmm. Interesting thought. It's a hard one because my brain goes to a couple different places. Pre full disclosure, you're there's this searching for information, there's this trying to understand, and some level of trying to control the outcome and your own safety. And we'll go more into this in a minute. Post full disclosure could be that not all the information actually came out. So there's a part of you that's still saying, like, there's something more. It could also be that you've gotten to these patterns and those patterns are hard to break. And so not wanting to leave that sense of safety, even though it's a false sense of safety, that could be there. There also could be some of our own family of origin or childhood stuff that plays into it that we have to look through and sort through to be able to understand it. So, this is a complicated one of understanding why it's happening because our brains tend to want to go instantly to, well, they are doing this or this or this. Therefore, because I still feel hyper vigilant, it must be them, which could be true, but it also could be our own stuff coming up with this.
But
So
how
there's
do you know?
yeah, so there's dissecting that have to happen. I will tell you in individual work, it's a really good area with a professional to start sorting through. And I see some of the greatest protectors show up in this area. And so this is one that I know I'm talking so slow because I'm processing as I'm talking, but I'm thinking I've had a client or two where we've looked at this hypervigilance and the protector parts in them don't want to look at it. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to address it. They don't want to do anything different
Right.
because it feels like something's threatening their safety
Right.
because they're clinging so hard to having some sense of control in the situation that feels out of control. You know, my recommendation is if you're working with a professional who's wanting to look at hypervigilance with you or look at maybe some of these monitoring behaviors and you're feeling a lot of pushback, don't avoid the topic, but get really curious within yourself of why there's so much pushback.
Mhm.
Because I guarantee right there's some really, really rich layers and levels to work through. So maybe we can rewind it a tiny bit and just go over what hypervigilance actually entails or looks like or could
Yeah.
entail. Like so hypervigilance can have heightened suspicion, which makes sense with what you've been through. So individuals who are hypervigilant after betrayal may become excessively suspicious of others' intentions and actions. And this could be your partner, but it also could be other people. So you may question motives of people around them or constantly seeking for signs of potential betrayal or disloyalty. And I did this. I don't know if you did this, Amy, but my brain went to everybody of, well, are you safe? Are you safe?
Yeah.
Can you hold this? Can I trust you? And I think for a while everything went into the default of nobody is safe.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I just wanna validate how real that experience is and kinda like what we were talking about before, how it's such a natural part of betrayal and the consequences of being betrayed. I was just telling you this morning, we're getting ready to go do a conference in Nashville, and I haven't been back to Nashville since everything went down, and I know that he had partners in Nashville. I don't have faces to them, and I was just telling you how, like, already my brain is hyper vigilant. I'm not even there yet. My brain's already going to this place of like, you might run into her. You don't even know if you'll run into her, right? Like, or them. And so it's just fascinating. And I want to give some normalcy to like how the brain works. I mean, look at how many years out, and this is what my brain is designed to do for that protective. It's like, hey, you're getting ready to go to that one place where all of those partners were, and you don't even know who they are. So every woman might be her. Interesting, you know? Anyways, so that's I just want to give you that example of like, that's what our brains do. And that's an example of like constantly monitoring. Here I am years out, my brain's still constantly going to monitor. Now, because I am aware and because I can, I'm in a different state of my healing, different stage of my healing, it's not taking over. I'm getting curious about it. And like I told you this morning, I'll be okay. I don't need to rent a car and drive around and try and find her, but I'll be okay. That's me being in charge of the hypervigilance rather than letting that part that's natural and protective take over. And I think that's the difference when we talk about the protective part.
I love that. I love that you slowed that down And we've talked about this on past episodes, but I want to highlight it again that our nature as humans, the default is trust people until they do something that says they shouldn't be trusted. We're hardwired for that.
Yeah.
But when you go through this, that default can actually be flipped to where then your default becomes people are not safe. They cannot be trusted unless they prove themselves safe. So part of this healing process and this reintegration is learning to get back to this place that people actually can be safe unless I learn that I need to have boundaries with them. But getting to that place, that reintegration and healing of the brain comes through the work that you just talked about. It comes around kind of challenging those thoughts and learning to listen to our body. And our brains have this thing called confirmation bias, where what
Mhm.
we believe, it's always looking for ways to reinforce. So if our brain believes people are not safe, it will constantly look for ways to reinforce that and also in ways to protect us. Now, I'm not saying that means that you need to go out and try to convince yourself that now my partner is safe. That is not at all what I'm saying because your partner may be working on safety, your partner may not be, but we want to just slow down that automatic process that's happening, that automatic confirmation bias, that automatic self protection, and just slow that down and listen to more parts of our body, our brain, our heart, and listen to those different parts and seek for more knowledge and understanding before we run off of that automatic default.
I love that you just said that because that right there is also an answer to a lot of the questions that you and I get of how do you tell the difference between like your trigger and reality, a trauma response or reality. It's that right there, that whole process of slowing things down, listening to all of your parts, getting curious and going, okay, what is my brain protecting me around, assuming, insinuating what is real, what is really happening right now in this moment. And it's just so important. I know we beat this to death, but it's so important. And even I don't recognize how quickly my brain goes into that speed mode. And like there's no arrival to this. There's no point in your healing journey. You're going to be like, great, got that checked off. I naturally will slow down now. I don't, at least have that skill, and I don't expect myself to have that skill perfected. It's something that I have to consciously choose into because what you just described there to me is that conscious, intentional use of agency.
Oh, for sure. Where my brain is going, and I'll be really fast with this, but in brain spotting, when we are brain spotting and we're accessing that deeper neocortical part of the brain that's hooked to the fight, flight, or freeze, it processes information at 11 million bits of information per second. Okay, 11 million. The subcortical, the part that you're thinking and processing and aware of, is 60 bits of information per second, which is still super fast. But that survival part of your brain, 60 bits of information per second versus 11 million bits of information per second, you think how quick that is going. I'm snapping for those who just heard that weird sound. How fast it's going. That's how quickly our brain can go trigger those fight, flight, or freeze, especially if you are working through PTSD post trauma
Right.
or in the middle of trauma, is a better way to put it. So just having understanding and patience with yourself, but slowing that process down. Okay. So another way that we can show up with hypervigilance or policing is the constant monitoring. We're going to go through some of the ways we do this or can do this. By the way, I think I've done almost, not almost, a lot of these at some point or another. Oh, if you have a shame response, just know Alana was there. Okay. Hypervigilant individuals may engage in constant monitoring of their surroundings and relationships. They might scrutinize conversations, behaviors, and actions of others, looking for, again, any indication of deceit or betrayal. Monitoring is one of the most common ways hypervigilance shows up. The monitoring gives a betrayed partner a temporary sense of control. Again, a temporary sense of control in a situation that feels out of control. Having something tangible to see and hold on to gives them a sense of security though it's a false sense of security, that in some way they are managing the situation. So, first one, managing his recovery, telling him what he should or should not do, or what he must or must not do.
We see that so much, and that's a hard one to let go of. The really, really hard one to let go of because I think a lot of the intention is, "I wanna help. I see your potential. I wanna believe that you're capable. I want this to work out. I see that you might not know what I know. You're not listening to podcasts, you're not doing any work, and so you might not know this, so let me tell you." And it feels like we're being helpful and a partner. It's just a really tricky balance there.
Well, and I see some partners who like pendulum swing of like, well, I can't manage his recovery, so I can't have a say,
Yeah.
and or I can't say anything. And managing the recovery is like, you will join this group. You can only do this therapist. You must do it this way. I see that you have this problem. You need to go work on this problem. Well, are you working on this? How are you doing this? And you get really into the nitty gritties of having them do it the way that you see it needs done.
You talked to
Now,
them about this? Did you bring up this in your session? Yeah, those types of things are managing and getting into the weeds where you don't need to be in the weeds. And so, yeah, there's that balance of here's what I need to feel safe. I need to see that you're doing work. I need to see that you're working with someone. But
and that's a tricky one. So if you are unsure of where you land with that, that's a really good one to bounce off of a professional who's trained in this. Another one, constantly checking your partner's whereabouts. I have my husband on Life 360, but when we were going through betrayal and recovering, I had to not have that app for my own well-being because I found myself obsessively, well, where's he at? What's he doing? And in the beginning, I needed that for safety for a period. And then I realized that my constantly being in the weeds of where he was at all day long, all that did is kept me spinning in the trauma. It wasn't actually helpful. Prying could be prying for information from him or from others about him or about them, sorry. Checking their phone, attempting to break into email accounts. I did that. Listening in on phone calls. I did that. Spying. I just totally spit. I did that. By the way, you don't need to know all the things I did. Let's just say I was in a lot of trauma. Obsessively checking social media accounts, picking locks, setting traps, setting up hidden cameras, hiring a private detective, searching home, clothes, office, wallet, car for clues, stalking your partner or the affair partners. Okay, I'm going to pause right there. Something's coming up for me as I'm saying these, Amy. There are times that you feel prompted or inspired, or your gut says, hey, I need to look in his wallet, or I need to do this. And that is real. I've seen individuals literally be led to exactly what they need to go find. I have had that.
yep, me too.
That is different than what we are talking about. What we are talking about is a pervasive pattern that is happening regularly, and it is emotionally, physically, psychologically happening in patterns versus a one off where you are feeling that prompting or that intuition to go look.
I like that you just slow that down and identify that because there really is a difference. I've experienced both. And there's a different feeling inside of me of that I need to go, I need to get up and go walk into the garage. Like, there's something that intuition. And I think that's really beautiful to acknowledge because that's one of the things that get out of whack is our intuition and sensitivity. So being able to trust that is really important. But
And
identifying the difference between and it just again going into your body and physiologically identifying the difference between a policing hypervigilant hit versus an intuitive hit. Just something to explore within you.
I'm glad we slowed that down. And we did do a whole episode on, is this a trauma response or is this my intuition? So if you haven't heard that one, go back to last week, listen to that. Okay, more ways it shows up: eavesdropping, hiding, throwing away their addictive substances. And that could be anything. I can't remember if I broke a phone or a computer. You'd think I would remember that, but there was a lot of things I did during that time. But that could be one of those. Breaking the things that have hurt you. I've had women who have broken their electronics, like video games, because they've accessed like pornography through video games, throwing phones in the trash, things like that. That is a trying to manage. Calling prostitutes, massage parlors, adult bookstores, affair partners, etc. Asking frequent questions about their activities and whereabouts. And it's okay to want to know where they're at. But if it becomes this pattern of, well, where were you? Well, what were you doing from this time to this time to this time? That frequent pattern, destroying property, interrogating is a hard one when we're not activated, especially in a trauma response. Threatening, constant phone calls or text messages, following them around the room or throughout the house, not allowing the two of you to be apart. We talked about that in an episode not that long ago about this fear of like, if I go on vacation or if we spend a night apart, or even just as much as possible trying to be side by side as a way to manage what they're doing. Calling, texting, or emailing. Oh, this is a hard one. Calling, texting, or emailing their sponsor, coach, or therapist. I will tell you, I'll have somebody reach out and I know why they're doing it. And they're like, hey, I just want you to know this. Hey, could you tell me about this? Just so you know. And I'll see it in my groups. The women will say, hey, is that so and so working with this person? Is their husband? I want to meet with this person to see where my husband is at. That's your husband's role to share with you where they're at. Going behind them and individually asking their coach, their sponsor, their therapist where they're at is hypervigilance. Trying to trap them, attempting to isolate your partner, showing up at their meetings to make sure they're attending, reading their journal, and leaving out ways for them to slip up. And there's more, but there's a pretty comprehensive, uncomfortable list.
And I wanted to go behind, like, every single one of those after you and be like, "And here's why we would do it, and here's why you would do that." So, again, we're validating the wazoo today because we understand, we get it, right? We know why you're doing these things. I wanna invite you drop into that curiosity rather than that, "Well, here's why I need to," and because it does it those are the protective parts, and there's a damn good reason why you're wanting to be protective, and we validate that. And again, it's not sustainable. This really does not only does that impact the trajectory of the coupleship healing part, right? Because that's not a sustainable way to show up in a coupleship, but it's also preventing you and your ability to connect with you when your focus is on them. And we're always trying to bring the focus back on you, not in a selfish way, but in a way that helps you see you, you connect with you to hear and realign with that intuition, sensitivity, and vulnerability. There's purpose behind what we're saying. I tell my boys, there's a method to my madness. It can seem like this is crazy that you're suggesting this. It feels very dangerous. And there really is a higher purpose to connect with your higher self that is critical to your healing journey.
Well, yeah, we have these protector parts that are so activated right now. And we want to protect from further harm. I have so many women say, I never, ever want to feel this level of pain again. Of course you don't. And there's this part of us that does actually want to rebuild trust. So, this hope that this hypervigilance can help us rebuild the trust, even though it doesn't actually work and it works against us, there's that part of us that tries to equate, well, if I see they're actually at their meeting, then I'll have trust. Well, if I read their journal and their journal says this or this, then I'll have trust. But then I'll tell you, your brain will have a way to talk yourself out of everything anyway. And so it doesn't actually long term build trust. Also, there's a fear of vulnerability. And so the hypervigilance can also protect us from being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that's another reason why we do it. And hypervigilance can be a result of emotions that have been unresolved. Meaning, if we're having lots of hypervigilance, especially long term hypervigilance, it's an opportunity for us to figure out what internal emotions for ourselves need to be resolved. And there will be lots of layers and levels to that.
Oh, yeah. Well, one that comes up for me too is like, that I'm pulling up as you say that is the fear that the marriage will end. So I need to be on top of this. I need to make sure that he's not acting out. I need to make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to, because if he doesn't, then that means I have to get divorced. That's a very common thought that brains offer a lot of these women, a lot of my clients that make the hypervigilant behavior, the policing behavior justifiable.
Okay, that word right there, justifiable. That's what I see so often with individuals I work with is their brain goes, okay, I know I'm doing this, and then insert really good reason why it's justifiable.
Yeah.
And the truth is, there are reasons that hold so much power. And so our brain goes, see, like I can't hurt my kids in a divorce. See, I can't end this marriage. See, I can never be in this pain again. So it links. I should be able to do these because this idea or thing that I need is so justifiable. But here's why hypervigilance long term is so damaging. And Amy, you touched on some of these. First of all, emotional exhaustion. Maintaining a state of hypervigilance requires a significant amount of mental and emotional energy, and it keeps you constantly activated in that fight, flight, or freeze, which the amount of toll that that can take long term on your body, your emotions, your brain.
Yeah.
That, like, go back to Betrayal Trauma 101, any of our topics on that, and it will go into why staying in that fight, flight, or freeze is so problematic. But
And
it
you
will
don't even realize it. Like, I want to acknowledge, like, you don't even realize because you've been living there for so long how much energy it's taking until you start to back off and get some space and create that safety within. Yeah, we could do a whole episode on that, but you don't even realize. So just, I don't know, maybe I'm just asking you to trust us on this, but like you are extending so much energy into this hypervigilant policing more than you realize.
yeah, yeah. Okay, another thing is when we are in a long-term hypervigilant state, we have a limited perspective. It's almost like a horse that has the blinders on each side that it can see right in front of them, but it can't see the bigger picture of all the surroundings. And I'm going to read this because I think this is going to say it better than I can. Hypervigilance narrows one's focus primarily on identifying potential threats or signs of betrayal. This hyper focused state may prevent individuals from seeing the bigger picture or considering alternative interpretations of others' behaviors. It can hinder the ability to form genuine connections or engage in open communication based on trust or growing trust. Another one, long term missed opportunities for growth. When you're in a hypervigilant state, you won't be able to take healthy risks. And taking healthy risks is what allows for growth to happen within yourself and within other relationships. So your relationship won't be able to progress forward.
It won't. And this is where I tell a lot of my divorced ladies who are wanting to date again after betrayal that a relationship is always a risk. We are just looking for the healthy risk. And when you're ready to lean back in, whether it's your current relationship after betrayal or you're divorced and you're going to do another relationship, we've got to understand it's always a risk. The difference is how can we take a healthier risk? And that's becoming healthy within yourself first. And
Mhm.
when you're in a hypervigilance, you're disconnected from that intuition, sensitivity, and vulnerability, which means you won't be connecting with another person in a healthy way. So whether that's current relationship, future relationship, this is a piece that needs to be resolved, worked through compassionately before you reintegrate into a relationship and call it healthy.
Love that. Rewind that, listen to that again. So spot on. Okay, next one is forced safety doesn't feel safe.
Mm,
I'm going to say that again
mm.
because your brain is not, if you're in this place, it's going to be like, I don't like that. But forced safety doesn't actually feel safe. When others are creating safety you want because they are being monitored, tracked, or otherwise controlled, it is common for a part of you to still not trust this behavior. There's a wondering if they're doing it because they want to or if because they have to. When
Yeah.
you give this control and allow them to show you through their own choices where they stand, you will get a more clear picture of where they are. So scary to let go of this control, but it is what will allow you to begin to judge your own safety more accurately. I can't say that this section enough.
Honestly, I'm just like, oh, I want to say so many things, but
I, I'll have women say, okay, but if I don't, then he will.
right. And
You're right.
then
And
what will you do?
yes, because are you going to maintain this the rest of your marriage? Are you going to carry this for the two of you the rest of your marriage?
Right.
Again, emotional exhaustion of that, not being able to grow yourself, not the there's so many pieces of why we can't sustain that. Yeah.
Well, we're breathing with you. We're breathing with you.
Yeah. Okay, last one. We've kind of touched on this in different ways, but strained relationships. It makes sense why you want to create the safety for yourself. The relationship to heal and grow needs the room to heal and grow. And it requires two people who are individually standing in their own choice and practicing and having room to do it right and to do it wrong. And if,
Authentically is what's coming up for me.
yeah, authentically.
Mhm.
And this is, you might hate this, but if I were in a relationship with somebody who everything I did constantly was tearing that apart and telling me I'm not doing it right and questioning every move that I make, the toll that that would take on me as an individual and on the relationship would be great. And so while you don't have responsibility for their choices, you have to be aware that these behaviors are impacting them and impacting the relationship. And please don't throw daggers through on me. Because if I had heard that at different stages, I would be like, F you, Alana, I'm not listening to this anymore.
Yeah.
And other times I would hear that and go, oh, I know. And I don't like that.
Yeah. No, it's true. And we say this all the time. Everyone's at a different point when they listen to these episodes. So just for what it's worth, use any of these episodes to be able to look inside yourself and see where you're at and know that there is purpose. When I teach emotion work, I'll just say there's purpose to every energy of emotion. There's purpose to every emotion. Anger, there's a purpose. Let's see, how is it serving me now? And do I want it to continue to serve me in this way? Am I ready for a change? Am I ready to make a shift? And I think that's just a really beautiful way to look at that rather than shaming or judging yourself for being where you're at. Just see how it's benefiting you right now to be hyper vigilant and to be policing. And then is that something that you want to benefit from today? Is that maybe something that you can put down today and see what it feels like to not have to exert that energy? So play around with it a little bit, but be very, very gentle with yourself. I just think awareness always is that first step. And this episode is to help you become more aware of your behaviors that you might not be aware of. Help put in your mind some of those thoughts of like, ooh, maybe this isn't really helping. And I thought it was. Let me get curious about that. Yeah.
We did an episode a while ago. I cannot remember where or when, but where we really broke down control and wanting and needing some sense of control. And then we looked at the control bubble and what's in our control and what isn't in our control. And right now, if you're listening to this and you're resonating with it, but also just how can I let go? Go look up that episode because I think that could be really helpful of just reminding you where your power does lie because you are not powerless. There are absolutely ways that you can create safety for yourself. And there's boundaries that you can have. And there's areas that you can release and let go of. And there's other areas that you can step more firmly into that are going to be healthy for you and healthy to allow the relationship to have an opportunity to flourish or potentially wither away because it takes two people who are doing this work, but you yourself can step into your own truth. So we're not asking you to be powerless here. We're not asking you to let go of a sense of control, but finding a healthier, more empowering way for you to do that, that you can stand in long term. So thank you for being with us this week. I know this one could have been a harder one, and just sending you love as you're doing this work. I know I've finished our episodes multiple times like this, but you're here and you're trying to learn and grow and develop. And that is so noteworthy. And give yourself empathy and love and compassion as you're doing this really, really hard work. And be proud of where you are today and how far you have come in your journey. So thank you us this week. As always, we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Head over to Choose Recovery Services and check out our new page that shows you what full therapeutic disclosures look like and how they are an important part of the healing pyramid. To find out more about why disclosures are so important, check out our past podcast episodes on those topics. Choose Recovery Services takes considerable care in how we facilitate disclosures to get you the truth needed to heal the relationship and lay the foundation to rebuild. To find out if you and your spouse are in a place to start the disclosure process, book a consult and let's chat. Healing takes choosing into, so continue to choose recovery, choose healing, and choose you. Take care, everybody.